詠春葉問。
And there is no question. I am the most complete fighter in the world.
Being two of the most iconic martial arts movie characters of all time from two of the most famous martial arts film series, we are here to determine who would win in the hypothetical one-on-one fight. Ip Man, the legendary Wing Chun Grandmaster and Bruce Lee's own Kung Fu mentor, or Yuri Boyka, the self-proclaimed most complete fighter in the world and king of prison fighters. Let it be clarified that this is not an examination of which character is better in terms of their personality or popularity, nor is this any sort of statement on whether Wing Chun or Kung Fu is superior or inferior to mixed martial arts. And there is certainly nothing being stated about a preference between Donnie Yen and Scott Adkins. This is strictly based on a theoretical physical confrontation between the two fictional martial artists. With that said, the real-life Ip Man will not be used, but instead specifically Donnie Yen's fictionalized version in Wilson Yip's Ip Man trilogy. This excludes the standalone Ip Man films, including Dennis To's portrayal in Herman Yao's The Legend is Born Ip Man, Anthony Wong's portrayal in Yao's other film Ip Man The Final Fight, Tony Leung's portrayal in Wong Kar-wai's The Grand Master, as well as Kevin Chang's portrayal in the 2013 Ip Man TV series. This is simply for the sake of limited time and also to avoid inconsistencies between the various cinematic interpretations of Ip Man. Not to mention, in The Grand Master, Ip Man's front kick combined with that of his opponents is strong enough to sandwich a rickshaw, only one of many absurdly superhuman feats that will be unfair for Boyka. Keeping with this idea of fairness, disregarding all but the main Ip Man films would allow for an equal amount of source material from both characters. 3 Ip Man films compared to 3 of Boyka's films: Undisputed 2, The Last Man Standing, Undisputed 3, Redemption, and Boyka Undisputed, also known in some countries as Undisputed 4. Or at least what can be gathered from the trailer and online reviews, that is. The original Undisputed film starring Wesley Snipes and Ving Rhames is not counted because although it precedes the events of Undisputed 2 and centers around the same protagonist, it has an entirely different cast and does not feature Yuri Boyka at all. Despite Ip Man's mastery of weapons such as the butterfly swords or knives and the 6.5 point pull or long pull for short, Boyka so far has not shown any extensive use of weaponry, and so this matchup will be based on pure unarmed combat. Standard MMA rules will be applied, which already seem to generally be followed in the Undisputed series.
Gentlemen, remember, no biting, no eye gouging, and no hair pulling.
That means Ip Man cannot use some of the deadlier moves in his Wing Chun arsenal like groin kicks and eye gouging, which isn't too concerning since he normally restrains himself from using them in the first place, with of course the exception of throat strikes. Disallowing these illegal moves may unfairly handicap Ip Man as they are in Wing Chun's self-defensive nature to quickly incapacitate an aggressor, but if they were allowed, Boyka could also use these moves and the outcome would not be all that different. Ip Man has fought in a variety of environments, even having used his surroundings to gain the upper hand, whereas Boyka has primarily fought in the ring, a setting Ip Man has only competed in on one occasion, giving Boyka the home field advantage if a fight were to occur in a similar location. Boyka has proven himself outside the ring before, but not nearly as often as Ip Man. It can probably be assumed that both fighters could adjust to whatever arena that is decided upon, but to even out the odds as much as possible, a large open dojo-like area will be chosen. Each fighter will be in top shape, which means that there will be no knee or back injuries stopping Boyka this time around. Both combatants will also not be given time to research one another and therefore can only claim victory by clever improvisation. So let's complete this analysis before Ip Man 4 is released in theaters and this is no longer relevant. And yes, there is definitely going to be an Ip Man 4. It was actually confirmed on Donnie Yen's official Facebook page that he and director Wilson Yip have already begun working on it. Alright, but anyways, moving on.
咁多位師傅你哋好，在下葉問，佛山詠春派，師承陳華順，請咁多位師傅多多指教。
有邊位師傅想上去玩兩手啊？
Starring Donnie Yen as the titular character, a role that launched his career to international fame, the Ip Man films are a dramatized biographical account of the eponymous Chinese martial artist. The first film depicts the life of Ip Man shortly before and during the outbreak of the Second Sino-Japanese War in 1937. After fleeing Fasan with his family, Ip Man moves to Hong Kong where the second film begins. There, he meets an eager new set of disciples and opens his first Wing Chun school, but encounters issues with a local landlord and an arrogant, racist British boxer. Ip Man 3 also takes place in Hong Kong, where Ip Man continues to teach Wing Chun but faces harassment from a local triad while tending to his wife's cancer. Another relatively unknown Wing Chun master makes an appearance as well, as does an adolescent Bruce Lee, having already been featured at the end of Ip Man 2. In reality, Ip Man had been a police officer in Fasan and a member of the Kuomintang, the Chinese Nationalist Party, forcing him to leave Fasan for Hong Kong after the communist takeover. In 1957, Ip Man began teaching Wing Chun to a 16-year-old Bruce Lee, who would go on to become arguably one of the greatest martial artists to ever live, or at the very least, one of the most influential. As a result, Bruce later incorporated Wing Chun principles into his martial arts philosophy, Jeet Kune Do. Wing Chun is a southern Chinese martial art which supposedly traces its origins back to a Shaolin nun by the name of Ngu Mui, who had developed their own kung fu style after witnessing a battle between a snake and crane. This style would be passed on to a woman, Yin Wing Chun, of which the martial arts name is derived from. This story may be more mythological than it is historical fact, but Wing Chun is agreed upon to have Shaolin roots and has over time diverged into many independent lineages, including that of Ip Man's. Ip Man in particular was responsible for having added its own modernized scientific terminology to the system as opposed to the more metaphysically based earlier incarnations. Wing Chun is now practiced all over the world as one of the most popular Chinese martial arts.
Oh,
Continue to study it, Mark?
I'm deeply committed to Wing Chun.
I've never heard of that.
Wing Chun is it's the form that Bruce Lee was trained in before he developed his own.
Wing Chun is recognized for its simplicity, efficiency, and directness, maintaining a solid but fluid structure. Fundamental to Wing Chun is a center line theory. The center line is an imaginary vertical line that runs down the front length of the human body. Emphasis is placed on close-range techniques that either attack the opponent's center line or defend one's own. By attacking the center line, the opponent's body is knocked back directly, losing their balance entirely, while attacks to the side would otherwise only cause a pivot, allowing the opponent to counterattack. Kicks are kept low to better control one's center line and balance, while tightening one's defense by reducing openings for an opponent to exploit. Wing Chun movements are analogous to water, which follow the path of least resistance, a concept summarized by one of Bruce Lee's famous quotes.
I said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
The opponent's force is diverted rather than being met head-on, flowing with them and only attacking when the opportunity presents itself. Thus, the muscles and joints remain relaxed to increase one's fluidity and optimize the speed and power of strikes. Offensive and defensive maneuvers are executed simultaneously, trapping the opponent's hands to deliver decisive blows. Besides empty-handed and weapons forms as well as sparring, an exercise called Chi Sao or sticky hands improves one's sensitivity through touch, thereby perfecting proper use of technique. Since we are using Donnie Yen's portrayal of Ip Man, it's worth noting that Yen's Wing Chun is undoubtedly legitimate. Donnie Yen had 9 months of training studying under Ip Chun, the eldest son of the real Ip Man. During that time period, Yen still managed to quickly master all 108 wind dummy techniques, despite only having known what he called the superficial basics of Wing Chun. Ip Chun himself praised Yen's proficiency as being comparable to contemporary Wing Chun masters. In addition to choreography from the legendary Yuan Wuping in Ip Man 3, the fight scenes from Ip Man 1 and 2 were conceived by the famed Hong Kong action director Sammo Hung, who also appeared as Master Hong in Ip Man 2. Sammo Hung has received training in Wing Chun as well as other Chinese and non-Chinese martial arts and is famous for both directing and choreographing two of the most well-known and authentic film depictions of Wing Chun, The Prodigal Son and Warriors 2. So there's no question that Ip Man will be representing the epitome of Wing Chun in his fight against Yuri boyka.
Oi! 貴様の名前は？
佢想知你個名。我只不過係一個中國人。佢哋話幽默です。
I still do not know what this life is for, or why it's been given to us. And I know that a man that's done what I've done does not deserve to dream. But I still do.
In his breakout role, British actor and martial artist Scott Adkins plays the Russian underground fighter Yuri Boyka in the cult classic Undisputed film series. Undisputed 2 begins with former world heavyweight boxing champion George Iceman Chambers touring Russia for a series of advertisements until he is framed for cocaine possession. Chambers soon discovers that he was set up by a local crime boss named Gaga. No, not that Gaga, this Gaga. Anyways, Gaga offers to release Chambers from incarceration if he is able to defeat the reigning prison fighting champion Yuri Boyka. In Undisputed 3, Boyka is spending his days as the prison's janitor, no longer able to fight due to Chambers having broken his knee in their fateful match in the previous film. But upon hearing of a new international tournament called the Prison Spets competition, Boyka is motivated to once again prove himself worthy as the greatest, this time against the world's most elite fighters. With a little help from Gaga and American prison fighter Jericho Turbo Jones from Undisputed 3, Undisputed 4 sees Boyka enjoying his freedom outside prison, finally competing in official mixed martial arts matches. Unfortunately, Boyka unintentionally kills one of his opponents, sending him to seek out the deceased fighter's wife, who can now only be freed from her lifelong debt and labor if Boyka wins yet another set of fights. With the plot of the films covered, Boyka's Russian heritage is made obvious, and so his fighting style must also be Russian. One such Russian style is Systema, a martial art where the goal is to minimize damage to both yourself and your aggressor by manipulating the 6 levers of the body: the neck, shoulders, elbows, waist, knees, and ankles. However, Systema is an internal martial art using indirect force to subdue the attacker, whereas Boyka is far more aggressive, showing an external direct approach. Perhaps Boyka is instead a practitioner of Sambo, a Russian hybrid martial art. While Sport Sambo and Freestyle Sambo only permit grappling, Combat Sambo additionally allows striking and is part of the Russian military's combat curriculum along with the aforementioned Systema. Like Systema, Sambo isn't specified to be Boyka's actual martial art though. Despite strikes being used in Combat Sambo, more attention is given to grappling, which does not reflect Boyka's elaborate striking habits. Nor does Boyka demonstrate certain techniques unique to Sambo, such as the casting punch and variations of certain leg locks. Boyka repeatedly claims to be the most complete fighter in the world, indicating a more varied and holistic style of fighting. The man behind Boyka, Scott Atkins, is trained in a wide variety of martial arts, including Judo, Jiu-Jitsu, Taekwondo, Karate, Kickboxing, Wushu, the actual Chinese term for all Chinese martial arts, Capoeira, Krav Maga, Jeet Kune Do, and Ninjutsu. Atkins is also a skilled gymnast and is even trained alongside real mixed martial arts fighters, especially former UFC competitor Vaughn Lee. The entirety of Scott Atkins' martial arts background has likely inspired Boyka's fight choreography and thus his fighting style, which suits both Boyka's character and the mixed martial arts theme of the films. Even if Boyka is not trained in every combat discipline, he may at least be aware of many of them given his historical knowledge of martial arts.
Look! Egyptians, Greeks, Asians, American boxers all made fighting into a science. I am the next stage.
Boyka clearly does not restrict himself to a single style. It is also important not to forget Donnie Yen's own diverse martial arts background,
我認識少少咧。
who won gold medals in several US Wushu competitions and is also well versed in boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai, Taekwondo, which he has a 6th dan in, Karate, Jeet Kune Do, Judo, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Hapkido, wrestling, and Tai Chi, which isn't just a meditational or spiritual exercise by the way, but originally an actual Chinese martial art, which Donnie Yen probably learned from his mother Bao Sin Mark, a Grand Master of Tai Chi and the larger Wudang family of internal Chinese martial arts. Donnie Yen can also breakdance and is skilled in parkour. Yen actually identifies his own personal martial form to be that of mixed martial arts, which is strongly expressed in the choreographed fight sequences of movies like SPL or Killzone as it is known in the West, Flashpoint, and Special ID. Films that brought mainstream appeal to mixed martial arts in Hong Kong as well as the rest of Asia. Yen is also a huge fan of the UFC, stating that he would compete in it if it were not for a recurring shoulder injury. But unlike Boyka's all-around style, it can be said with certainty that Donnie Yen's portrayal of Ip Man almost exclusively specializes in Wing Chun, with a few exceptions of course. But can Ip Man's Wing Chun mastery contend with the versatility of Boyka's universal combat system?
Bring me your fucking champion.
Before discussing the specific details of a hypothetical fight, basic attributes of each fighter must be explored. Experience is the least tangible attribute a fighter can possess and is often overlooked in contrast to their physical abilities. One indicator of experience can be age, as older martial artists usually have attained greater wisdom than some in the greater youth. Ip Man might be a couple decades more advanced than Yuri Boyka. The age of Donnie Yen's version of Ip Man can be estimated based on the real Ip Man's birth year 1893 and the first film taking place through the 1930s, which must mean he was around his 40s. The third film begins in 1959, meaning he is already in his 60s, a full decade above Donnie Yen's actual age. In spite of Ip Man's senior status, his on-screen abilities do not suggest his skill level has dropped significantly for the most part. Boyka, on the other hand, is considerably younger with an age equivalent to Scott Atkins himself, who was around 30 during the release of Undisputed 2. Because there is an unspecified time gap between the events of Undisputed 2 and 3 as well as 3 and 4, it's reasonable to assume Boyka to still be in his 30s and at most early 40s if using Scott Atkins' current age. Regardless of these estimations, both fighters show no sign of being past their prime, with Ip Man possibly having more fights under his belt over the years than Boyka. According to the ring announcer in Undisputed 2's first fight, Boyka had established his reputation with 34 wins and 0 losses, and subsequently defeated Davik, who was considered to be quote-unquote extremely good.
Heard that one before.
Adding his victory over Dimitri soon after, and Boyka had accrued 36 consecutive wins, minus the fight with the drugged-up Chambers, before being beaten by Chambers in the film's climax. Though Ip Man has never been shown to have lost any of his fights, we can excuse Boyka for his loss against Chambers, as he was the film's antagonist after all and did not have Chambers' plot armor, so to speak. Boyka went on to win every fight in each successive film anyway, with an untold number of victories between Undisputed 3 and 4 during his official MMA career. Aside from the fight scenes shown in his films, Ip Man must have participated in many off-screen honorable duels with other Chinese martial artists. But on-screen fights carry the most substantial evidence of a fighter's prowess, and both men have fought a huge variety of opponents. Ip Man has faced masters of various styles of Kung Fu, including that of the Northern, Hong Ga, Monkey Style, Baguazhang, and even Wing Chun, as well as those of non-Chinese martial arts such as Karate, Muay Thai, Muay Boran, and boxing. Boyka has mostly faced other mixed martial artists, some with their own specialties like Muay Thai, Capoeira, and even a bit of Wing Chun. Both fighters have also confronted opponents of higher weight classes like Boyka's bout with Saikov and Kashmar, and Ip Man's matches against Taylor Miller, aka the Twister, and Frank. Ip Man seems to have fought against a more varied set of opponents, while Boyka has met much heavier foes. Both fighters can single-handedly outmatch multiple attackers at a time. Yet Ip Man has taken on larger groups and on a more regular basis than Boyka, who's usually only involved with one-on-one engagements. Being known for his infamous brawl with 10 karate black belts who are themselves fairly well coordinated, Boyka pales in comparison, whose aggressors were unskilled brawlers at best. Staving off 16 bandits armed with axes and even more men in the shipyard in Ip Man 3, with some assistance from Chang Tinchi later on, are amazing examples, but the 10 karateka fight is still Ip Man's most impressive so far.
師傅，原來你真係可以一個打10幾個㗎。
It should be noted that the black belts were taking turns, as is the common cliche in martial arts movies, though Ip Man did for a brief moment engage 4 of them at once. It isn't as if Boyka's opponents haven't also usually obeyed the sacred one-at-a-time rule, albeit his round against the Ozar brothers, 2 highly skilled Kabans, is exemplary. Nonetheless, Ip Man remains as a more archetypal one-man army, and any generic kung fu film henchman may as well just give up and sprint in the opposite direction. Be that as it may, Ip Man's multi-man fighting prowess sorta conflicts with his struggles with bigger opponents, which is odd in comparison to Boyka's sometimes challenging but generally easier ring fights with similarly sized adversaries, despite now simultaneously beating down as many individuals as Ip Man. The two martial artists' relative age and the diversity and quantity of their antagonists grants no discernible edge to either in terms of combative experience, and so more particular attributes must be assessed instead. Speed can be measured in a number of ways, and Wing Chun is particularly famous for his chain punching, or roll punching as it is alternately called, which utilizes a piston-like rotation of the arms. Viewing footage from the films in slow motion at half, quarter, and 1/10 of normal speed while counting the number of punches at variable time intervals under a stopwatch, Ip Man throws on average about 7 to 8 punches per second. The Guinness World Record for most full contact punches in a minute is currently held by Robert Ardito, unsurprisingly a Wing Chun master, who in 2009 landed approximately 805 punches in a minute, or around 13 punches per second, about 5 to 6 punches more than Ip Man. FYI, what you're seeing is actually his previous record of 428 punches per minute, or 7 punches per second from 2005, since I couldn't find any videos of his most recent record. Nevertheless, Ip Man's comparatively lesser chain punching speed is still absolutely ridiculous, and some behind the scenes footage reveals that movements were likely not sped up or frames cut out, and that Donnie Yen himself is really that fast. Boyka tends to throw much slower yet more devastating combinations instead. The velocity of each individual punch is another gauge of speed, but almost imperceptible if observing film footage alone. Reaction time, however, can be observed, and Ip Man's exceptional reflexes appear to outshine Boyka's, though the latter was able to knock out a man pointing a gun at the back of his head at point-blank range before he could fire a single shot. Boyka does take more hits than Ip Man, but this could merely be a tactical decision as opposed to a slower response. Brutality and showmanship are key traits of Boyka's style, in contrast to Ip Man's more straightforward attacks, requiring less time to execute, following the basic geometric principle that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Wide arcing motion is the hallmark of Boyka's striking preference, which takes longer to reach a target but generates a greater degree of force overall through the rotation of the entire body and use of the core and abdominal muscles. Compared to Boyka's long-range strikes, Ip Man's are of shorter range, traveling a smaller distance and making contact sooner. Wing Chun also emphasizes simultaneous attack and defense, adhering to the principle of the economy of motion, allowing Ip Man to execute 2 moves in the same time period that Boyka needs to perform just 1 technique. In the realm of speed, Ip Man is supreme, forcing Boyka to rely on his superior strength, the next attribute that will be discussed. Strength is the most obvious and sometimes most overrated of characteristics, but is still critical to a fight. Along with the curvature and rotational power of Boyka's striking method, his larger muscle mass grants him far greater physical strength. Muscularity also seems to correlate strongly with overall strength in both Ip Man's cinematic universe with the likes of Twister and Frank as well as that of the Undisputed films. Information on characters' weight measurements will be elaborated on later, but suffice it to say that the correlation between musculature and physical strength is indeed significant for this hypothetical fight. Boyka has a knack for delivering knockout hits, but Ip Man can dish out his own powerful blows, throwing jackhammer-like chain punches and pushing heavier men several feet away. Both martial artists can launch strong kicks that can effortlessly shatter wood. Practicing his Wing Chun on the wooden dummy, also called a Mukyanjong, has increased the density of the muscle, bone, and other tissues of Ip Man's arms and legs, turning them into deadly anatomical weapons. But this external conditioning of the body is not what defines Wing Chun's application of power. Internal strength, or Jing as it is known in Chinese martial arts, produces force through Qi, or life force energy. Biomechanically speaking, this translates to the transference of kinetic energy by way of proper body alignment, focusing all of one's power onto a single point, which differs from simply depending solely on muscle strength, as is the case with Boyka. Though it would be unwise to underestimate Boyka's pure physicality, as was mentioned before, he typically beats down fighters that Ip Man has a lot more difficulty with, including some several sizes larger than Ip Man's strongest opponents. Boyka even accidentally killed another MMA competitor despite wearing gloves. In a battle of strength, Boyka would dominate. However, there is one apparent inconsistency when it comes to determining how strong Ip Man is. Ip Man and Master Hong were both evenly matched, but interestingly enough, it was Ip Man that had more trouble dealing with Twister. Master Hong gained the upper hand early in the first round and only lost his footing after receiving a ferocious left hook in the second round and succumbing to his asthma for the remainder of the match, ultimately costing him his life. Master Hong is just as fast and as skilled as Ip Man, but more acrobatic, with strength comparable to Twister. It can be deduced that the tabletop contained the fight in a space small enough as to favor the close combat of Ip Man's Wing Chun style, while his constant wobbling necessitated an incredible amount of balance, enabling Ip Man to keep up with a much stronger Master Hong. The static floor of a ring of course needs no such balance and provided Twister the opportunity to exploit Ip Man's weaker physical strength. Ip Man's ability to balance himself is so great that he could kick back and land on one half of a broken tabletop. His senses are also so attuned that he dodged all of Cheng Tinchi's chain punches even after being semi-blinded by a dishonorable BUG jab to the right eye. Ip Man's strikes are undeniably lethal, displaying tremendous short-range power with a fabled 1-inch punch, made famous by Bruce Lee, but it is speed and skill that defines Ip Man's method of overcoming his greatest adversaries. Resilience might sound like a vague category, but this attribute can be broken down into factors that are beneficial to how long a fighter can last in a prolonged engagement. Stamina is crucial to a lengthy confrontation, which both martial artists have greatly exhibited on more than one occasion. Ip Man is more conservative of his energy, conforming to the economical motion of Wing Chun, using minimal effort for maximum force, whereas Boyka's high-flying dynamic movements are significantly more wasteful, yet they don't appear to tire him out much. Both fighters have endured extended melees, only weakening due to injuries and frequently lasting until knockout, with Ip Man being knocked down several times by Twister and, considering his tie with Frank, likely having become more resistant to heavy hitters as a result. Although some of Boyka's fights have involved matches ending with only one man alive, and so has habituated himself to taking massive amounts of punishment as an MMA fighter, often purposely letting himself get hit. Trauma to the head specifically is dealt with by either riding the punch, whereby a fighter moves with the punch decreasing his damage, or absorbing the impact altogether, especially instances in which Boyka outright headbutts his opponent's punches. Boyka has little to no concern with leaving himself open for attack with wide swinging punches and kicks, while Ip Man's Wing Chun prioritizes defense with quick retractive techniques meant to cover up more vulnerable areas of the body. Motivation is also pivotal for a fighter's resilience. Ip Man is ordinarily a restrained and humble man, but provoked by and threatened of his friends and family by oppressive military forces or ethnocentric foreigners, he will unregrettably release all his suppressed rage on the poor hapless souls that dare to harm those he cares for. Boyka is notorious for his bloodthirsty battles, having killed other inmates and serving a prison term for 3 homicides. Granted, he has developed a more merciful and respectful attitude towards his opponents in recent films.
Good fight. Foi uma luta boa, cara.
But he is utterly ruthless when angered. The circumstances surrounding the two characters' fights also matter just as much as independent feats of resilience. As was mentioned earlier, Ip Man easily incapacitated 10 karate black belts, bruising and blooding his knuckles in the process. He later defeated General Miura, a master of karate and an intimidating fighter in his own right. This was all during the time Ip Man was constantly starving and had no time to practice Wing Chun, preoccupied with long days at the coal mine to support his family. But this compares little to Boyka's phenomenal pain tolerance when he both unrelentingly trained and fought with a recovering broken knee in Undisputed 3 with barely any noticeable decrease in agility. Boyka even fashioned a makeshift cast with a prison mob to distract from the excruciating pain and fractured Dolores' right leg with his own broken knee, ending the final fight of the PSC tournament. All of this was accomplished in spite of Boyka having been underfed,
Breakfast is over.
and overworked. But even these achievements will be outdone in Undisputed 4, where Boyka defeated Zurab's best fighters with a debilitating lower back injury. Even repeatedly being clubbed by baseball bats only managed to just piss him off. Ip Man did also survive a gunshot wound but immediately collapsed afterwards. In the world of martial arts films, Boyka is no doubt the very definition of durability. So how would a fantasy fight between the two actually play out? This is where the bulk of the analysis will be given, gathering evidence from all previously evaluated attributes of experience, speed, strength, and resilience to determine which martial arts would definitively come out on top. Before beginning this final phase, you must be reminded that this has nothing to do with Wing Chun being better than MMA or vice versa. It is not the style that is relevant, but the practitioner themselves. Some have argued that Wing Chun's relative absence in mixed martial arts proves that its traditional ways are outdated and currently surpassed by modern systems of combat. MMA's supposed impression as a universal indicator for the practicality of a martial art is not totally valid, however, as in spite of its lax rule set, it is still restricted by specific regulations, which does not highlight Wing Chun's original design for street defense instead of less probable and slightly more artificial one-on-one duels. Another objection can be raised in favor of Wing Chun that throughout the course of MMA history, certain martial arts once thought to be unsuitable in the ring or octagon has successfully legitimized themselves with the advent of intelligent fighters capable of realistically refining their martial techniques to extraordinary effect. In the early days of the sport, grappling went unchallenged with Royce Gracie's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu until eventually proficient strikers claimed the spotlight, from the traditional karate of Lyoto Machida to the comprehensive stand-up game of Anderson Silva. With the continued evolution of MMA and increasingly greater prominence of stand-up striking, who's to say there won't ever be a martial arts adept enough to modify Wing Chun for full-contact all-out fights? But most important of all, this analysis is associated with fictional characters. It doesn't matter if Wing Chun doesn't work in real life, because it obviously does work in Ip Man's own films on an exaggerated cinematic level, so that real-world combat speculation need not apply. With that issue settled, let's visualize this imaginary matchup. Ip Man almost always waits for his opponent to attack, no matter how enraged he may be, responding to any mistakes that could be made. Boyka is all the more likely to strike first, but will still maintain caution, with both fighters sizing each other up. Because pre-fight preparation is disallowed, the winner can only be justified by judging how well each martial artist has fared against opponents similar to one another in the past. The first question that must be answered is whether Ip Man has encountered a fighter like Boyka. That answer isn't so simple, since mixed martial artists had not existed in Ip Man's era, which coincides with the film's loose but moderate historical accuracy. To Ip Man, Boyka is more or less analogous to an amalgam of Twister in regards to strength, aggression, durability, and boxing ability, and Kam Shan Jiao in terms of his acrobatic long-range strikes. Boyka's similarities to Twister will be detailed first. Boyka's stature and build is close to Twister's. Scott Adkins' height and weight will be measured in place of Boyka's, with Atkins himself standing at 5 feet 10 inches. While his weight fluctuates between film roles, he likely bulked up when playing Boyka. Therefore, the ring announcer's statement in Undisputed 2 of 92 kilos or 203 pounds is acceptable for this analysis. This weight is probably constant for Undisputed 3 and 4, designating Boyka as a light heavyweight by standard MMA weight divisions, standards which will be used for all subsequent characters. Twister's measurements will be taken from the actor and martial artist that portrayed him, the late Darren Shalavi, who is 5 feet 11 inches tall. His weight is unspecified, so based on the assumption that there is generally a 5 to 7 pound increase per extra inch of height and Shalavi is 1 inch taller than Atkins, Twister's weight can be rounded to about 210 pounds, placing him barely at heavyweight. Twister has around 10 pounds on Boyka, which isn't huge, but does make a small difference strength-wise. Ip Man's height, or that of Donnie Yen's, is 5 feet 8 inches, and though Yen normally maintains a muscular physique, he had reportedly lost 30 pounds eating only one meal a day to reach 120 pounds for the Ip Man film, making him a flyweight. During filming Ip Man 3, Donnie Yen weighed around 145 pounds, refusing to lose an additional 30 pounds out of concern for his health after being asked to do so by the film's director Wilson Yip. A maximum weight of 145 pounds would thus raise Ip Man to bantamweight. Regardless, Boyka still outweighs him by 55 pounds compared to 65 pounds with Twister. That means Boyka is 5 weight classes above Ip Man. It's already been pointed out before that weight and strength are highly correlated with one another in both the Ip Man and Undisputed universes. This strength to weight correlation manifests itself in Ip Man's universe, particularly in the form of ludicrously over-exaggerated feats like Twister throwing an albeit very light Ip Man flying across the ring, which actually required wires to perform. Boyka's weight being nearly equal to Twister's grants Boyka similar strength. The 3-inch difference between Ip Man and Boyka, just like the 4-inch difference with Twister, also gives Boyka the benefit of greater reach, complementing his long-range strikes. Besides height and weight, Boyka's punching form is partly derived from boxing, which Twister is of course a world heavyweight champion in. Believe it or not, Darren Shalavi did display authentic boxing in his choreographed sequences as Twister, in contrast to the variety of Eastern martial arts he typically showcases in his other films.
Now what Sammo did on this movie, he would constantly say, keep your hands up. When I see you throwing a right punch, I want to see your left guarding your face. Normally I would drop this hand for a movie, but for this film he would have every time I punch, I'm protecting myself at the same time. So in actual fact, what we're doing on this film is more close to real boxing than I think that I've certainly ever done before.
Twister's boxing style resembles that of a brawler or slugger, delivering somewhat predictable but powerful punches, something even his trainer admits to.
This'll be a piece of cake, mate.
Just go out there and get him, slugger.
This parallels Boyka's own boxing style to some extent, though there may be a disparity in skill between Boyka and Twister. Fortunately, Boyka has fought a world heavyweight champion boxer before, or at least a former champ. That boxer is none other than George Iceman Chambers, who in Undisputed 2 accepted a match from Boyka, who insisted on boxing rules, arrogantly believing he was the better boxer.
I'll beat you with your own game. Fists only.
Just don't bleed on me too much.
This ended with nothing but complete humiliation for Boyka, validating Chambers' status as a boxing legend and confirming Boyka's less than desirable boxing ability, which is almost a foreshadowing of how the rumored nonsensical boxing match between Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather would turn out. No offense, McGregor. But going back to the analysis, Chambers is played by martial artist and actor Michael Jai White, who is legitimately trained in actual boxing and served as Scott Axe's boxing trainer. Boyka claims to be the most complete fighter, but after that embarrassing defeat by Chambers, is he really?
Get the fuck out of here.
He may just be a well-rounded martial artist rather than a full-on expert in multiple fighting styles. Boxing is not Boyka's strength, and during a second round with Chambers, he relied on kicks to the legs and lower body. But if it wasn't for his water bottle being imbued with some sort of sedative, Chambers would have lasted considerably longer, calling into question even Boyka's non-boxing techniques. It also cannot be forgotten that Chambers defeated Boyka following an indeterminately short amount of training with fellow inmate Nikolai, also referred to as Krot. Nikolai taught Chambers what he called
grappling, military close combat, things you might need in this type of fight.
Which might have been combat sambo or sistema given Nikolai's background as an ex-Russian commando. Apparently, he also taught Chambers how to do the dab, long before the dab was even a thing. The dab is pretty much dead now, but I digress. Ignoring narrative convenience, can it be said that Chambers is simply naturally talented in martial arts and able to quickly grasp their concepts? Or is Nikolai simply an amazing trainer? Observing how he reacted to harassment by other inmates, there's no denying that Chambers already possessed immense lower body strength with his strong kicks, along with skillful throws and even basic staff techniques. Instead of concluding that Boyka is a lackluster mixed martial artist, Chambers can be credited as having an innate aptitude for combat, which says more about Chambers' giftedness than it does Boyka's deficiencies as a fighter. A post-Nikolai trained Chambers made for a challenging rival, and Boyka deserves some slack for putting up such a tough resistance against his opponent. Whether Boyka could currently defeat Chambers is debatable, but judging by the awe-inspiring victories Boyka has earned over his 3 films, such an assertion can reasonably be made. He has shown improvement with each new fight, countering moves that initially troubled him and implementing them into his own arsenal. Boyka is an excellent fighter, and his loss with Chambers should not underrate his reputation. But returning to Boyka's boxing potential and his bout with Chambers' own height and weight are important. Chambers, or Michael Jai White, is 6 feet, only 2 inches taller than Boyka, a slight range difference. Michael Jai White's weight is estimated around 205 pounds, but considering his noticeably higher proportional muscle mass than Boyka, whose own weight is about 203 pounds, the 5 to 7 pound per inch increase can be added with White's 2 extra inches for a max weight of 220 pounds, marking him a heavyweight. Chambers is 20 pounds heavier than Boyka, while Twister is 10 pounds heavier. Chambers fought bare-knuckled, while Twister fought with gloves. Say what you will, but boxing gloves do lessen physical trauma to the person being hit and damage to one's own hands by weighing down the fist, thereby reducing the speed of the punch. Gloves also absorb the punch's momentum by compressing the glove and spreads out the force of impact over the wider surface area of the gloves rather than the tinier surface of the knuckles. While bare knuckle, Twister knocked out Master Hong's students with single block and jab combinations, though they were much smaller than him. Chambers also took down similarly small inmates, but with a few more hits, albeit body shots. Boyka also had his fair share of fisticuffs with the occasional prison guard or bodyguard who were much larger than Master Hong's students, necessitating more effortful hooks to knock unconscious. Boyka prefers hooks and haymakers, but his jabs are still quite powerful, stunning opponents who normally aren't easily hurt, including the much larger Saikov who otherwise tank the punches of other fighters. Along with his greater weight, Chambers may be as physically strong if not stronger than Twister. Chambers may also be much faster. Twister has also displayed some significant hand speed and the characteristics of a boxer-puncher, a boxing stylist that employs a balance of defense and offensive power. Boyka's style can be labeled in the same manner, but with notably less defense and more offense, utilizing combos that could sometimes be faster than Twister's. Chambers presented far swifter technique than either the two, however, with remarkable speed for a heavyweight supplemented by effective counterpunching and non-telegraphic striking like the great Muhammad Ali. Though unlike Ali's longer-range outside punches which gradually wore down other boxers, Chambers closed in and pummeled Boyka into oblivion, much like Mike Tyson, who will be mentioned later. This also revealed Boyka's susceptibility to quick, precise close-range strikes, which Ip Man of course is no stranger to. By the way, if you're wondering why footage of Chambers from the first Undisputed film wasn't reviewed, it's because his style did not match what was shown in the second film. Tangent aside, is a bare-knuckle Chambers stronger, faster, and more technical than a bare-knuckle Twister? If so, Chambers may be of a higher difficulty level than Twister in a boxing match so that Boyka could be on Twister's level. As a boxer, Boyka might be missing the technicality of Chambers or Twister, and while he has shown some competence in boxing, they were only in fights against mixed martial artists whose concentrations were not in boxing. Twister could trump Boyka in boxing skill, but Boyka may pack more punch as was seen when facing Saikov, and his fists might possibly fly faster than Twister's. Though not having stood a chance against Chambers, Boyka's lower skill but stronger punching power and slight speed advantage over Twister could create an evenly matched ungloved fight between the two. This means Boyka is equivalent to a bare-knuckle Twister, which would be more troubling than Ip Man's own confrontation with a gloved Twister. If Ip Man were substituted by a gloved Boyka against a gloved Twister, the match would last considerably longer than between Boyka and Chambers, possibly resulting in a tie, though Boyka being more durable may outlast Twister. Though overstating Twister's own abilities can be problematic since Ip Man would have defeated him in less time if it were not for Twister's blatant cheating and unjustified match rigging by the judges. Ip Man was knocked down in the beginning of their fight but managed to return the favor about a minute later. Ip Man receives another knockout, but this time only because of the bell ringer's cheap refusal to signal the end of the first round. Successfully blocking and dodging Twister's hits while launching a few concussive strikes himself, Ip Man is felled by an illegal punch immediately after the second round bell sounds. Frustrated by Ip Man's tenacity, the judges decide to handicap him by forbidding all kicks. When Ip Man unknowingly lands a kick on Twister, the referee reminds Ip Man of the non-kicking rule, but Twister begins punching before Ip Man is even ready, knocking him to the floor once again. Twister does finally lose, but only after the odds are deliberately stacked against Ip Man. Boyka's boxing by itself may be more challenging than Twister's, but Ip Man would have had much less trouble without all the unfair conditions set upon him, while Boyka will be playing as fair as possible. Ip Man also fought Frank, a property owner and triad boss portrayed by Mike Tyson, in what can be described as a live-action kung fu adaptation of Punch-Out! Frank is primarily a boxer with a more pronounced defense than Twister through his peekaboo guard, which was strong enough to repel Ip Man's kick. Frank also displayed impressive defensive speed, allowing him to slip and bob past Ip Man's punches. Moves that are all representative of Mike Tyson's actual boxing style. A variation of swarming or infighting which revolves around bobbing and weaving, pressuring an opponent to enter their inside and obliterate them with intense close-range combinations. Frank is probably more accustomed to bare-knuckle no-holds-barred fights than Twister, and it goes without saying that his on-screen boxing is also legit, as Tyson was a real former world heavyweight champion, despite having been off an ear or two. Frank is likely physically stronger than Twister, with more hardened fists. Frank, or Mike Tyson's height, is 5 feet 10 inches, which is about equal to Boyka, 1 inch shorter than Twister, and 2 inches less than Chambers. Though Frank's weight is the greatest of all 4 boxers in this analysis, weighing 240 pounds, 40 pounds heavier than Boyka, 30 pounds heavier than Twister, and 20 pounds heavier than Chambers, indicating a much higher punching power than all of them. Strangely enough, Ip Man's fight with Frank was limited to 3 minutes, but he did not sustain as many knockout blows as he had from Twister. This could be explained by Ip Man's ever greater experience with boxers, which resolves the paradox as to why he would have an easier time against a boxer with strength and skill superior to Twister's. Frank may have also relied more on body shots, particularly powerful uppercuts, which might be out of personal choice, or because of Ip Man's avoidance of shots to the face, having learned his lesson from Twister. Boyka may not have the punching potency or boxing skill of Frank, and so will not pose as much of a threat to Ip Man. But in terms of punching strength, Boyka has struck out larger opponents, especially the monstrous Kashmar, played by the 6'8", 320-pound bodybuilder Martin Ford, suggesting Boyka's punches may match or even outmatch Frank's. Ip Man's learning curve with previous boxers can still catch up to a physically stronger puncher like Boyka though, evidenced by his draw with Frank. In spite of a much poorer pugilistic proficiency than Ip Man's prior boxing rivals, Boyka does have the strength and durability that could outclass him. Boyka is a formidable fist fighter, yet Ip Man's past history with other dangerous boxers would allow him to adjust. Even so, Ip Man must stay vigilant as one single punch, particularly when Boyka is in his berserker mode, could knock him out cold. Fortunately, the most powerful punches tend to be slower and more easily dodged, where Ip Man can deliver his blows while staying inside of Boyka's hooks, also keeping in mind his crosses and uppercuts. Traditional boxing is not the exclusive source of punching though, as Boyka has demonstrated the elusive Superman punch and back fist. Boyka has even used punches to his opponent's legs to stop their kicks. Other martial artists have used similar strikes before against Ip Man however, and he would only need to get used to Boyka's brute force. Boyka was also seen practicing chambered punches on the makiwara used in traditional karate, but presumably for conditioning purposes rather than actual combat application. Speaking of Ip Man always clashing with boxers in his films, if Ip Man 4 is going to feature yet another boxer, it should be an extremely fast, technical, lighter weight boxer who can square up with Ip Man pound for pound. which could be far more entertaining than the usual heavyweights that mostly just outmuscle him. But besides Boyka's comparisons to Twister and connections to boxing, he is also similar to Kamshan Jiao with what may be his most theatrical method of attack, the kick. Boyka knocks down the majority of his opponents with flashy but fatal kicks. His combos may string together an assortment of other strikes, but his finishing moves mainly consist of some kind of kicking technique. Stemming from Scott Atkins' own background, Boyka's kicks are mainly derived from Taekwondo, a Korean martial art that uses every part of the body as a striking surface but has contemporarily become popular for its variety of spectacular kicks exhibited in competitions and demonstrations. Combined with punches, Boyka utilizes a distinct kickboxing style for his array of strikes. The legs are generally more muscular and therefore stronger than the arms, as well as affording greater range. Boyka's kicks could be even deadlier than the fists of Ip Man's previous boxing opponents. As stated before, Boyka is comparable to Kamshan Jiao, a master in Northern Kung Fu, or more specifically Xiaobei Chuan or Xiaobei Fist. Northern Kung Fu is known for its long-range, high-aiming, circular acrobatic attacks and extravagant kicks, much like Boyka's own style, in contrast to the short-range, low-stance, intricate hand-based Southern Kung Fu, also called Nang Chuan, which includes Wing Chun and Hong Ga among others. Both Kam and Boyka also share mid-body to low kicks, with Boyka often employing a spinning back kick, a favorite among MMA strikers. Kam proved his capability as a fighter, defeating 3 other Fosun Kung Fu masters before being effortlessly beaten himself by Ip Man. Boyka has around the same reach given Kam's actor and martial artist Louis Fan Siu Wong's 5'10" height, but Boyka is likely much heavier, increasing the strength of his kicks. Kam's kicks were more exaggerated though, as many of them were aided by wire fu, making Boyka appear a bit more ordinary. Except Boyka's kicks involve greater rotation of the body, exemplified by the tornado kick, which includes the 540 and 720 variations. Ip Man would have to duck underneath Boyka's whirlwind and jumping spinning kicks, since being caught by the centrifugal force and leg power of just one could end the fight. Thankfully, these spinning kicks take longer to execute, leaving more time to evade, and although they could be blocked, their sheer force could injure Ip Man's arms or at least push him back, losing him valuable ground. One detriment to Boyka's spin kicks is that they expose his backside for counterattack, which Ip Man will be keen on exploiting considering Wing Chun's uncommitted strikes that do not allow such exposure. Ip Man could follow up with a kick or stomp to the back of the knee. Though some of Boyka's planar kicking techniques can be easily countered, his trickier, more complex aerial combos coming from unexpected angles, in some instances switching legs at the last second, could catch Ip Man off guard. The most quintessential example being his signature Guyver kick, which some fans have even dubbed the Boyka kick, though it had already been featured in earlier martial arts films like Ong Bak and even one of Scott Atkins' own movie, Special Forces. The kick itself is in fact named after the 1994 film Guyver Dark Hero. These unconventional kicks are more likely to land, since even if the first kick were to miss, an unexpected second kick could come in, and even if it's self-blocked, could force Ip Man backwards. Ip Man would need time to figure out Boyka's misleading legwork, but it wouldn't be impossible to do considering Ip Man having handled Kam's deceptive kicking. As fancy as they are, Boyka's most effective kicks may actually be the more basic type, simple side kicks or push kicks that are hard to dodge and painful to block given their direct forward momentum amplified by Boyka's tremendous leg strength. Punches and kicks do comprise a large part of Boyka's striking, but a small selection of it also consists of elbows, which are useful in mid to close range, Ip Man's own preferred range of combat. Elbow strikes were even used to his opponent's thighs to block kicks. Knees are another form of striking which Boyka delivers either in a clinch or in midair. Elbows and knees are found in almost every martial art, but they are most commonly associated with Muay Thai, which adds more torque to their own elbows and even knees. This makes Boyka also similar to, albeit with a greater degree of strength, the unnamed Thai boxer who attempted assaulting Ip Man and his wife in an elevator. Although the Thai fighter style resembled less Muay Thai than it did Muay Baran, a collection of ancient unarmed Thai martial arts that the sport of Muay Thai is descended from. Muay Thai or not, Boyka integrates all these striking techniques into incredible combinations of anatomical artistry, giving Ip Man more than enough to worry about. Now that Boyka's comparisons to Ip Man's previous opponents have been specified, the next question to answer is whether or not Boyka has fought someone like Ip Man. And the thing is, Boyka sort of has, but not really. Raul Quinones, or Dolor as he is known and feared as, is also a practitioner of Wing Chun. Kickboxing and Taekwondo are also thrown in, with Dolor's gravity-defying 900 kick and other insane acrobatics that even rival that of Boyka's. Otherwise, besides some hooks and jabs, many of Dolor's hand strikes are based in Wing Chun. Despite the so-called completeness of Boyka's fighting style, it looks like he might have skipped out on his Wing Chun training. Just another reason as to how in actuality, Boyka isn't the most complete fighter in the world.
You need to shut your fucking mouth.
As was seen before, Boyka is somewhat defenseless against quick mid to close range attacks. If Ip Man gains the opportunity to close in, Boyka could be battered with a barrage of lightning fast strikes with pinpoint accuracy. Though Boyka would likely be protected by his tougher exterior and respond with a counterpunch, unless Ip Man focused on aiming for Boyka's often undefended head rather than his torso, stunning him and finishing off his series of face shots with a well-placed kick. However, Dolor had the advantage of longer reach, with his actor and martial artist Marco Zaror standing at 6'2", 3 inches taller than Boyka. Dolor's reported weight of 210 pounds, about 7 pounds heavier than Boyka, also moderately increases his striking capacity. Ip Man does not have the benefit of Dolor's range and physical strength, consequently allowing Boyka to casually shake off many of Ip Man's strikes. Dolor had also secretly used what he referred to as, which were probably steroids for speed and strength as well as pain-inhibiting opiates. Fun fact, in reality, Ip Man was himself an opium addict, while the film version was only a smoker. Nevertheless, Boyka was still capable of landing multiple sledgehammer-like hits on Dolor in spite of his broken knee. Though, due to Dolor's arrogance, sense of theatrics, and tendency to taunt his opponents, a lot of those punches may have been avoidable. Also, consider that Ip Man's compact size is not necessarily a disadvantage, as this enhances his maneuverability around Boyka's often flailing offensive, also making Ip Man a smaller, more difficult target to strike. However, being a grandmaster of the art, Ip Man's Wing Chun skills far surpassed that of Dolor's, having defeated another Wing Chun expert, Cheng Tinchi, who himself destroyed gangsters and kung fu masters alike. That character is also getting his own spin-off film, by the way. But with Ip Man's more advanced knowledge of Wing Chun comes particular techniques Dolor had not incorporated and thus Boyka would not anticipate, such as the Fuk Sao, Tan Sao, and Bong Sao. Unlike any fighter he has ever seen before, Boyka would be hard-pressed to read Ip Man's bizarre linear movement patterns. Boyka as a long-range striker would aggressively keep Ip Man at bay with a flurry of fists and feet and attempt to knock him out with an unorthodox kick. Eventually, realizing Ip Man's close-range tactics, Boyka would charge in, assisted by some hard elbows and knees to Ip Man's frail body, inevitably leading to a fierce grapple. Having discussed the similarities between Ip Man and Boyka's previous opponents to one another, there is one special element in Boyka's moveset that will confound Ip Man's experience. That element being grappling, which is another potential response to Ip Man's close combat, of which neither Twister or Kam or any of Ip Man's prior adversaries have excelled in. While Boyka may not be exceedingly adept at grappling but more of a jack of all strikes, he has displayed a clear competence in non-striking techniques from a multitude of martial arts. Boyka's arm locks and throws are adopted from Judo, a Japanese martial art that utilizes a few strikes but mostly emphasizes grappling, especially recognized for its throwing techniques. Judo is intended for using the momentum of one's attacker against him, but Boyka's greater physical strength could definitely add to the power of his throws, tossing Ip Man around like a ragdoll. Aside from Judo, some of Boyka's throws are even found in wrestling. Ip Man would also be better off avoiding a clinch, as Boyka could simply bring up his knees and bludgeon Ip Man until he slips away. Ip Man appears to be somewhat familiar with clinch fighting and may find ways to counterattack. But Boyka's greater experience would enable him to exit the clinch whenever he wants, having the choice of putting Ip Man in a rear naked choke and possibly even breaking his neck. The clinch position also provides Boyka the opportune moment to force Ip Man into the most uncomfortable scenario, ground fighting. Boyka's ground grappling specifically is partly rooted in Jujutsu, the predecessor to Judo originally developed by the samurai to battle armored enemies. Though Boyka's groundwork is more likely based on his later incarnation, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which does teach stand-up grappling but concentrates more on taking the fight to the ground. Despite the countless kung fu masters Ip Man has confronted over the years and the heightened sensitivity acquired from his lifetime with the Chi Sao exercises, none have had the enormous strength and particularly ground expertise quite like Boyka. As a stand-up fighter, Ip Man's Wing Chun is dependent upon the stability of his stance, which Boyka would ferociously seek to compromise. Dolor also seemed to favor stand-up combat and was more or less helpless when Boyka threw him onto the mat and resorted to the basic but effective ground and pound, a strategy which also negated Dolor's superior striking. Ip Man has used his own form of ground and pound, but Boyka could simply absorb the punishment and react with powerful kicks or punches as well as reversals to gain a dominant position. Boyka's ground-based striking is also far more devastating than Ip Man's, with the power of Boyka's body weight being multiplied by the downward force of gravity. Ip Man also uses grappling, but only as a means to facilitate strikes through use of what is known in Wing Chun as trapping, grabbing and immobilizing one arm to decimate the attacker's unprotected side. Ip Man's most brutal grapple strike combinations incapacitate his enemies by a punch to the spine, elbow to the shoulder blade, a head twist takedown either sideways or straight to the ground, followed by a knee lock and ending with chambered punches to the face. Ip Man prefers regaining an upright stance instead of staying on the ground. In contrast, Boyka has at least in several instances used grappling as an end in itself rather than a means to striking by executing a submission. The spine shoulder blade strike would also probably be ineffective in pinning down Boyka anyway given his hardened musculoskeletal tissue. Boyka has even shown fancier takedowns like the flying armbar among other unusual techniques. Ip Man has also surprised his opponents with grapples from outside Wing Chun including scissor leg strikes, but they wouldn't fool Boyka, who of course is likely familiar with such moves. Even attempting a bone-breaking joint lock on just one of Boyka's arms would be nearly impossible, which Boyka himself could pull off with less effort. Boyka's grappling skills add a whole nother dimension to the fight. Faced with the daunting task of defeating Boyka, instead of conservatively sticking to traditional Wing Chun, Ip Man would have to adapt his fighting style. In his match with Twister, Ip Man borrowed techniques from Hong Ga like the double punch and even moves from two of its 5 animal styles like the crane beak strike to the eardrum and leopard fist to the side of the face. Another of the 5 animals, Snake, is already somewhat contained in Wing Chun forms like the Biu-ji, but others found in Honga like Tiger and Dragon are absent in Wing Chun and can be applied for grappling and palm strikes. These non-traditional Wing Chun attacks will probably mostly be centered around pressure points, however, which Ip Man is particularly proficient in, targeting softer, more sensitive areas of the body such as the deltoid and armpit, utilizing uncommon striking surfaces like that of the Phoenix Eye Fist and two-fingered strikes. Ip Man's fingers alone are powerful enough to launch the ammunition cylinder out of a revolver. Still, Boyka can endure the lethality of these attacks and retaliate by aiming for Ip Man's liver, floating ribs, or solar plexus. Since eye gouging, throat, and groin shots are not allowed, one of the most debilitating strikes will be to the biceps, as was highly effective against Twister due to the bulk and lack of spread of the muscle tissue and thus lesser shock absorption by the bones and tendons. When not on the offensive, Ip Man's own defense can be used to injure Boyka, elbow blocking his fists, which are much faster, requiring shorter movements than fully extended punches and involve a harder, broader surface colliding with a smaller, more fragile surface. Disabling Boyka's arms and hands is a useful precaution, nullifying 2 of his most valuable assets for both striking and grappling. Boyka will initially bear the strain but eventually succumb, wearing down his upper body. When facing Twister, Ip Man also may have used some monkey kung fu through his evasive ground maneuvers and strange follow-up attacks. Another style Ip Man can employ but does not seem to have applied so far is Bagwajang, one of the 3 Wudang Chinese martial arts, the other 2 being Tai Chi and Xingyi. Bagwajang is recognized for a pattern of motion called circle walking, which enables the practitioner to fluidly loop around an aggressor's movements, perfect for when Ip Man needs to step in and out of Boyka's pressuring attacks while possibly firing out some chain punches. Bagwajang is also an internal martial art consisting of what is called a soft component, whereby the attacker's force is deflected instead of being directly resisted, similar to Judo, which Boyka also uses, albeit in a more physical manner. This softness of force is also a principle of Wing Chun, and Ip Man could expand upon this concept by blending it with Bagwajang to perhaps redirect Boyka's strikes and throws, though Boyka himself is much more skilled in countering throws in particular and would not be outwitted so easily. Ip Man could also mix in some long-range strikes from Kam's Northern Kung Fu to control his distance and further confuse Boyka, who is expecting only close-range combat, but Boyka naturally possesses greater reach and will likely catch on to Ip Man's tricks anyway. At the very least, by this point, Boyka's arms will be rendered more or less useless by Ip Man's crippling assault. Boyka still has his incredibly strong lower body, however, which can literally kick the shit out of Ip Man. Ip Man's next objective is to annihilate Boyka's legs, his 2 most powerful striking tools and the physiological foundation of any fighter.
Man is like pyramid, but upside down. You cut his legs. Hitler kaput, finish.
Okay, how do we begin?
The legs also provide some significant leverage when it comes to grappling, especially for arm bars. With Wing Chun emphasizing low kicks, Ip Man would obey this rule more than ever, keeping low to the ground to dodge Boyka's high kicks and react with his own kicks to the lower body. Only using high kicks when Boyka is recovering from hits, utilizing a smaller size for parrying and even footwork to step back from strikes while bobbing and weaving like a boxer, yet another non-traditional Wing Chun technique. Kicks to the midsection like Boyka's spinning back kicks will be handled by Ip Man with a sidestep or push kick. Sweeping the legs would be a tactical error though, considering Boyka's much sturdier legs. Ip Man could respond to Boyka's own sweeps by a jumping dodge. Ip Man would need to focus his strikes on weaker points of the legs such as the outer sides and particularly the inner sides along with the back of the knee, grabbing one leg to strike the other once weakened enough. Boyka's orthodox stance leaves his left leg most vulnerable, though he has switched to his right leg to fool his opponents. Ip Man has been seen in the Wing Chun training stance called the Ji Kim Yung Ma in actual fights, but normally maintains what can loosely be called a southpaw stance when engaging more difficult opponents, which exposes his right leg. Among the various weaker areas of the leg, Boyka's thighs will be the last place Ip Man should concentrate on, as they contain the largest and most robust muscles. Boyka could reciprocate with his own round kicks to Ip Man's thighs, hitting delicate spots like the femoral nerve, a strategy frequently used in Muay Thai but also common in other kickboxing styles like Sancho or Sanda and full contact karate styles like Kyokushin. Boyka can check any of Ip Man's own round kicks, a block which could even snap Ip Man's leg, as was the unfortunate case with Anderson Silva. Ip Man has never taken such punishment to the legs before and would threaten to destabilize his stance, which Wing Chun is fairly reliant on. He could try to shift balance from one leg to another to mitigate the pain, but Boyka is far more adaptable in this regard given his fights in Undisputed 3 and his inherently mobile stance. Nonetheless, Ip Man always devises new and creative methods for defeating his more challenging enemies. Introducing techniques never witnessed before, it wouldn't be far-fetched to say Ip Man could conceive of an approach not yet featured in any of his previous films. Continuing to prioritize Boyka's legs, Ip Man could strike Boyka's feet, preferably with his elbows to ideally fracture the bones, with special attention to the toes. The leg muscles below the knee may be the most susceptible to injury, in particular the gastrocnemius due to the bulge and poor skeletal shock absorption similar to the biceps of the arms. Ip Man can even bombard Boyka's legs with fast consecutive hand and elbow strikes while in the crouch position. By this stage in the fight, under the best circumstances, Boyka's arms and legs will be badly bruised, with Ip Man himself having been bloodied and bashed around by Boyka's onslaught of punches, kicks, knees, and elbows. Boyka is also a sharp and strategic fighter, and there is a chance that he may recall Turbo's Marine Corps mantra:
Improvise, adapt, overcome.
To restructure his style, possibly raising his defense. But this is very unlikely. While Boyka has utilized some smart countermeasures against his adversaries, he ordinarily opts for outright overpowering them, kept alive by his absolute willpower, triumphing by brawn over brawn. Both Ip Man and Boyka would be just at the brink of total exhaustion, but Ip Man's disabling attacks would leave Boyka with nothing to properly attack or defend with. Boyka's durability may be leagues above Ip Man's, but it matters little if he were to be virtually immobilized and under the mercy of Ip Man's fists. Ip Man would just barely claim victory. But is this really how the fight would go down? One major and potentially flawed assumption is that Ip Man would actually survive long enough to demolish Boyka's limbs. But at any time during the fight, Boyka could out-grapple Ip Man, crushing him with his overwhelming weight. Ip Man has fought and defeated multiple martial artists with diverse striking skills and could learn to predict Boyka's powerful attacks, but it is his grappling that is the greatest threat to Ip Man. The huge variety of Chinese martial artists Ip Man had dueled in the past has given him vast experience in a whole range of grapples, but it is Boyka's inescapable ground fighting and terrifying strength that will ensure Ip Man's demise. Boyka will not simply wait around patiently for Ip Man to figure him out and craft a plan of attack. Other fighters may have allowed Ip Man to get back on his feet after being struck down, but Boyka will not hesitate and keep him on the ground. Accounting for all possibilities, by a modest margin of 65 out of 100 fights, Boyka is the undisputed champion. So, did you agree with the results?
No.
What did you think of the analysis?
I think you should fucking hang yourself.
I was originally going to implement more details and footage from the full-length Boyka Undisputed 4 movie, but because its DVD and Blu-ray release has been repeatedly delayed, now only out around August, almost 11 months after premiering at the Fantastic Fest Film Festival in Austin, Texas back in September 22nd of 2016, I just gave up and went with the trailer and preview scenes. Also, because using one of the numerous illegally downloaded copies out there will probably send the wrath of copyright hell upon me. I've already pre-ordered the Blu-ray Steelbook edition and am anxiously awaiting its arrival, something I encourage you to also do, whether it be the Steelbook or standard DVD or Blu-ray editions, because it will financially support another Undisputed film. Undisputed 3 did not sell very well because of illegal downloads, recouping only $282,000 from its $3 million budget. That's a loss of around $700,000, which partially explains the over 6-year wait between Undisputed 3 and 4. You should also consider purchasing the 2 other Undisputed films and the Ip Man trilogy if you have some spare cash. But that's your prerogative, I can't force you. Judging by the trailer, Undisputed 4 would probably only make Boyka appear even more likely to defeat Ip Man, even if I used it. Anyways, let me know your critique on this video and leave your comments below. And please do me and yourselves a favor and behave by conducting a mature, civil, and open-minded discussion. The YouTube comment sections are already barbaric enough. Now, I'm not a martial artist myself, but if you are, your insight will be greatly appreciated. Even if you aren't a martial artist, another fresh perspective in and of itself will be helpful. Due to the ambiguous nature of fight choreography, this fight might have gone in an intriguingly different direction. I want to thank Eric Daler, an instructor at Minnesota Kung Fu, for giving me some input on my early outline for this analysis. You can check out his website and YouTube channel. Links are in the description, as are information on footage, music, and sources I've used. And thank you so much for watching all the way through if you actually had the attention span to do so. Stay formless, shapeless, and be water.